This is the Hoff Time Report with Idaho Freedom Foundation President Wayne Hoffman, one of Idaho's most respected, influential public policy voices.
Welcome back. It's good to have you here again, and we're happy to have a special guest again. We have Senator Carl Crabtree, who has the distinction of serving on both the Education Committee and on the Budget Committee. That's kind of cool. So you're different from all your peers because you're on these two very, very important committees. So now that you have that perspective, what are you going to do with it?
Well, interestingly, Wayne, when I came down here, I asked around, what committee should I get on? I talked to Skip Brandt, one of the former senators from the same town I'm from, Kuski.
Yep.
And Skip said, whatever you do not get on education or finance.
Wow. Yeah.
I didn't listen well.
You didn't listen well at all.
No.
So now and in fact, the discussion that took place in today's meeting, which I don't know when this will be up, but today, the chairs of the House and Senate Education Committee went to JFAC and said, here's what we're looking at relative to the budget. Since you hold both those positions, what are you looking for in the budget for K-12 and higher ed?
Well, I always look to try to find places to cut the budget, and I tried to sell that like yesterday on the floor and was unsuccessful in doing so.
Yesterday you had a discussion on the Advanced Opportunity Scholarship,
which,
correct? Right.
We come down here and we tell about how conservative we are when we're out on the campaign trail, and we come down here and we look to sign blank checks, and I don't like that. In the case of Advanced Opportunities, we went from a $500,000 deal to over $30 million with stated objectives to improve the go-on rate. Haven't moved it a bit.
So now we're going to
make it bigger.
We're going to expand it. It'll include private school kids.
Great.
Now, some people are arguing that's a legitimate reason for expanding that program, because you have the public school kids that get access to that program, and the private school kids now have access, or would have access to that program, which apparently doesn't work.
Well,
but it's fair.
It's like Wayne, I explained. I'm in the cattle business, so when we lose money, we explain to the banker, well, I need to expand my operation, so I'll make money.
Right.
Well, it doesn't work that way. You make bigger losses. And so that I tried to explain to the senators yesterday, we've got a problem. We don't need to make a problem bigger till we fix the problem. Then let's add on to it.
What is the problem?
The problem is we spent $80 million on Advanced Opportunities, and we have not moved the meter a quarter of an inch in terms of go-on rate. Now, maybe it's good in some other ways, but I think if I gave kids free money to do video games, public money, I'd get a lot of them sign up. And so they love to go to college, so they sign up, but we're not improving what our stated goal was, which is go-on rate.
Does that stated goal even make any sense?
Not to me, but I didn't state the goal. It was before my time.
You, as a legislator, don't have to go along with it. I mean,
I didn't. I voted against it.
You voted against it.
And I debated against it. But I only had half a dozen senators buy into it. They all want to give free lunch to everybody.
So where should we be putting the money relative to the education system? It says in our state constitution that it has to be free, uniform, and thorough. Those are the things that our school system has to be and public. But what do you want to see? You play this dual role of being on the Education Committee and on the Budget Committee. What would you like to see happen?
Well, if it were my choice, and it's not, but I think our problems are we're barely getting half of the kids in Idaho prepared by third grade to be average reading levels. Well, if you can't read, and it's been documented in research beyond me, that if you can't read by the third grade, it affects the rest of your life adversely.
Okay, so
I say we got to solve these problems early. Now, what does that mean? Well, we've got a bunch of ideas that we're throwing around. I'm not a curriculum guy, but I want to see some people propose to me solutions that are measurable, not good ideas, but measurable ideas.
Well, I did see a bill that was introduced that would basically extend the existing education system dollars to pre-kindergartners. Is that something that you're favorable to?
As long as the families are involved with that, I'm on board. But if it's just going to be somehow the government controls the pre-kindergarten, I'm not interested. But we've got to figure out a solution. And I'm going to go by recommendations of people who know more about it than me, but I want achievable objectives that I can measure, not theoretical anecdotal stories.
Well, why do we assume that government has solutions at all for this? Maybe the problem is the government keeps interceding in these education matters. So now we'll extend out the government's involvement in pre-kindergarten, and that's going to make it all better?
I don't know. But what we're doing doesn't work, whether it's, for whatever reasons. And so if it doesn't work, do we want to just keep doing what we're doing? I'm not interested in that. And if we've got some private ideas that are going to be so wonderful, let's do those. But I'm the guy in the legislature, and I got to try to find ways to solve problems. And in education right now, it looks to me like those younger kids are not achieving. 50%, that used to be a flunk when I went to school.
Well, but when you went to school, there also wasn't a kindergarten program. You went to school. There was first grade through 12th. Then we added, and then I'm just telling you how it is. This is familiar to you, right?
No,
so then we added kindergarten, and that didn't improve anything. Now we're going to add this other.
Yeah, I'm not sure it didn't improve anything.
Well, the idea of kindergarten was to get kids ready for first grade.
Right.
So now we're saying we have to have pre-kindergarten in order to get kids ready for kindergarten, so they'll be ready for first grade. So it seems as if we're just moving the goalposts a little bit.
Well, what I'm saying is we're not being successful at what we're doing, and I really don't think, if you were to ask me what's wrong with education in America today, it's the breakdown of the family unit.
So
That's not the government's job.
Does it help the family unit more when the government gets involved in pre-kindergarten? Even by saying, here, we have some money available to you, so you can use that for a pre-kindergarten program in your school district, does that help solve the problem?
I don't know, but I'll tell you what, I will not support any ideas that don't have measurable outcomes. So we will know if we do these things and they work, or we'll know if they don't work. But to keep doing what we're doing, we'll get the same result.
Well, Common Core has a measurable outcome, but the Education Committee hasn't gotten rid of it, even though you said last year as part of the committee that we're not going to do it anymore.
I did say that, and we have changed
You
that.
and your colleagues, I should say.
Yeah. But there will be recommendations to change all that. That's got to go through a 2-year process, as you probably know, public hearings and so forth. So recommendations have been made to change that or eliminate that, or however you want to.
Do you see that on the horizon, that it's going to actually, it takes 2 years, but, I was talking to Senator Thane a couple of weeks ago, and he says that it could even take 4 years for that to fully matriculate through.
Serious. Well, I hadn't heard that. I don't know. Yeah, he's maybe his different opinion. I would expect that next year.
Well, just the process that you have is.
Well, the process we have we can finish that by next year at this time and vote on it. Unless there's.
Which means that then it would be implemented the following year.
Yeah. Well,
so that's
fiscal year 2023.
Yeah. So there
July.
you go. So then from the decision in 19 to do something different, and then 20, nothing really happened except sort of a commitment to maybe look at it, have an interim committee, and then 21, 22, then 23. It's just a long process.
Well, it is a long process, and if Wayne, it is the solution to our educational problems to get these standards right, then we'll be successful. And nothing I see the government as kind of the Titanic, really slow to turn and takes on water as it does. So I don't expect it to suddenly be the epiphany of success. But if it is, it'll be worth waiting for.
But do you think maybe education savings accounts play a bigger role in getting some of your objectives? I know your committee hasn't taken a look at that yet,
right.
But obviously there's some discussion about giving parents the ability to shop around for education services wherever they want, however they want it. And then maybe that would lead to some better outcomes, some of the outcomes that you're talking about at the younger levels and later on in school years. What do you think?
Well, part of that discussion includes like the strong families, strong whatever that the governor, is a $500 person allotment.
More than that, yeah. I think it was $3,000.
Well, his was, but what we're talking about now is $500.
Oh, okay, that's news to me.
Yeah,
I was under the impression that 500 is not going to get you very far.
Well, that's for the top part of it, the strong families, and then if you want to go for the full board 90%, you're talking $5,400 or something per person.
Okay, but you're favorable.
So there's two phases. So I'm totally on board with the first part of that. Let's get these kids, because I didn't realize how successful that thing would be last summer, helping these kids out. But in my rural areas now, Wayne, and that's what I'm a rural guy. My biggest town is 3,600 people. So I'm as rural as you can get. And those kids don't have money. They don't have products to take home with them like computers, and they don't have internet access. And so those are the things I got to get solved if we're ever going to be successful at any kind of remote work, which is what this can help pay for.
So you're saying you're favorable to, but you haven't heard all the answers as to how it's going to work just yet, or what is it you're saying?
What I'm saying is I am in favor of the first part of that discussion, which is about $500 a kid to help them buy internet access, help them buy computers if they need it, software or whatever. But that's the part of the program from last summer. I think it's great, and it was a lot better than I thought. So
if it's more than that, is that something where you as a budget writer,
right, that
you would have some objections to?
Well, I'd want to take a hard look at it because, see, one of the things about we in rural America don't have, I think there's 70% of the kids in Idaho don't have choices to spend their money on. And it costs more to educate a kid in rural Idaho than it does in Boise per kid. And so we have to figure out, if everybody gets the same allotment, rural Idaho loses. And I'm a rural guy. So when I see rural Idaho being able to benefit, great. But if everybody gets the same, not so good for rural Idaho.
So with the Advanced Opportunity Scholarship, you made a big deal about the expenditure there. The same might be said about the Opportunity Scholarship also, the one that's used for high school students to go on to college. There's not been a lot of study as to whether that actually has utility. It's millions of dollars. I forget how much it is right now, but are things like that also under the microscope for you?
I think they should be. I don't think there's anything for me that's off the table for discussion. I mean, that Opportunity Scholarship thing, one of the reasons the legislature does that is because the costs are so high for these kids, and we're trying to help kids, and it's all, for me, I'm kind of a money guy, and a lot of the people in the legislature are more about the children than the money.
What does that mean?
Well, they love the children. Anytime you can say, well, it's for the children, then we just sign the blank check. And that's frustrating for me. And that's what happened yesterday.
Is that really? Do you see the legislature as having done that?
Totally. Did you see what happened yesterday? Everybody agreed I was right with the money part, but they didn't care about the money part.
So what does it take for them to care about the money part?
Well, I don't know.
Well,
I mean, everybody's who they are, but I think all our constituents feel that way too. I get, they don't talk to me a lot about money. Well, they talk to me a lot about philosophy, and we love the kids, and we got to do better, and we got to do more, and all that. Yeah, but there's, in a business, you don't just do more because you want. It's the difference between a want and a need.
But if you take the kids out of the equation, we'll talk about money. As a side note, because I wanted to focus a lot on education, but being on the budget committee, one of your bigger budget items is Medicaid. And that's been blown through the roof. You happen to represent a district that voted against Medicaid expansion.
Right.
So is there talk about reining in Medicaid or repealing Medicaid expansion or doing something? Because if there's concern about money, I mean, this is way bigger than your Advanced Opportunity Scholarship, right?
Totally.
By a wide country mile. So what about that?
Well, here's what, I do the education things first, and then we have other people that do. I don't do Medicaid, Medicare, budgets.
No, but you must have an opinion.
I do, and I'll get to that. But I think it's outrageous what's going on in our healthcare. First time this ever in Idaho's history, the healthcare budgets are going to exceed the education budgets in Idaho. Well, what's wrong with that picture but everything? So we've got to rein that in, and part of it is trying to control the costs somehow, because it's another blank check option for the medical community. It's like, hey, here's the bill, pay it. So, I look to Senator Agenbrod as a friend of mine, and we'll write that bill for this funding and all of that. He's a very capable guy and an ex-banker. He understands money, and he understands the Medicaid thing far better than I do.
But you understand the costs. I'm just wondering, so do you think that there will be some legislation either through the germane committees or through your budget committee to tamp down some of those costs? And will your colleagues go along with it? Will they be supportive of an effort to rein in those Medicaid expenses?
Well, they talk the talk. We'll see if they walk the walk.
Will you rail as loudly against the Medicaid budget as you have against the Advanced Opportunity Scholarship on the floor of the Senate?
I will not rail because I'm not a knowledgeable guy on the Medicaid budget. I know a guy that is, and I will follow his lead because, Wayne, in this business, if you try to be an expert on everything, you're an expert on nothing. There's just too much. I mean, you're going to be an expert on every line of, $8 billion. I can't. I'm kind of Joe average.
Well, so education's is where you're.
Well, we try to do. Nobody's. I try not to be a curriculum guy because I'm not a school teacher. I'm not a professional educator. I try to represent my people, be kind of a common sense guy that can kind of, if it makes sense, it might be all right. If it doesn't make sense, maybe no. But if you're going to try to get me up against the wall that I'm an expert on everything in this legislature, you got the wrong guy, as you know. You
must have had some conversations, and you heard with today's hearing on the higher education system. That's a very big budget, too. It was about $300 million or so.
Yeah.
And there's some concerns about whether that money is being spent appropriately, and what do you do about that? And what we're talking about is the social justice thing that I've asked every interviewee about as they've come through these doors. So where are we on that?
Well, it's like conservative. How do you define it? I think first we got to agree on what social justice is specifically, because everybody's got a different version of it. But I think we've got some problems as I look at what's going on at least one of these universities. I've got some questions, and they haven't been answered. And that'll be reflected in the budgets that we recommend.
What questions have not been answered to your satisfaction?
Well, I'm concerned about how much money, public money, has been spent on social justice and what the definition of social justice is. And we're going to work on that. But how those budgets are developed, and you probably know this, but a group of us who are on JFAC will sit down and work on each of those budgets line by line and agree upon what should be done about them. Now, those will be senators and the representatives, and then we will come to an agreement. If we don't come to an agreement, we'll have two different budgets presented on the floor of JFAC, and we'll vote on them. Then they go to the Senate and the House to be passed. So that's the process, and it hasn't been worked on yet, and there's been no decisions made yet. And so we're going to try to lay out all the facts to each other and come up with an answer.
There's some discussion about splitting the budgets and by their components. U of I has one, Boise State has one, Lewis Clark State College and ISU, they all have four schools, four budgets. Or is that something you want to do?
Well, I know it's you folks' recommendation to do that, but I don't see how that makes it any different than what we've already got. They're already analyzed individually and line by line. So I'm not sure how much different. Nobody talked to me about whether it was a good idea or not. Personally, I don't see the advantage. Having worked on those budgets, I'm not sure I see.
Well, I mean, do you think all four schools should be treated the exact same? Do you think that Boise State is doing less social justice indoctrination than, say, Lewis Clark State College, which is probably doing the least of all of them? I mean, is that do you feel they should be treated differently as a result?
I think they can be treated differently in the budgets that we have now. Well, that's what we do. And we've done that in the past, so I don't think that's news. And we do the community colleges that way. I wonder almost why we're not doing community colleges and four-year institutions at the same time. I mean, they are broken out. They are separate. So I think some of the people talk about it, and I don't know, nobody's talked to me about it, may not be totally familiar with how we break those things apart in JFAC before we present them.
Well, no, I mean, of course, you can divide. I mean, there was a time when you didn't have multiple budgets for the K-12 education system. That was 20 years ago.
Yeah,
that was changed. So I mean, you can change
the
way.
Can do it. Yeah, but I wonder what purpose we're going to serve. I don't know how
for more accountability. I mean, isn't that one possibility that if you vote up or down on the Boise State University budget, you're voting up and down on the university budget? Because I remember last year, you didn't get to witness this because all the action took place in the House, but they voted on two higher education budgets that both failed before the third one came back to address certain concerns. And one of the things that came up was that the Lewis Clark State College, they haven't done anything terribly horrible in the minds of legislators, but there were more concerns about U of I and Boise State than Lewis Clark State College, but they all come together in one budget. So is that not a legitimate?
Well, no, that's exactly what we did. I was involved in all three of those budgets, in the writing of those. And, yeah, I know we worked at each of those individual universities separately within the higher education budget.
So do you think you can hold Boise State University and University of Idaho accountable for the
and
things
differently if we want to. It's not about me.
In that same budget?
Sure, as we do it now. That's not hard to do.
Which school is concerning you the most out of?
Well, I'd
the
say
four?
Boise State is, because I think they've got, I don't know whether they've done it wrong or they've said it wrong, but I think there's probably some things that need to be changed in both areas. But
Do you think the university president has answered your colleagues' questions to your satisfaction?
you have to ask them. But
How about for you?
well, I think for me, I'm a little disappointed that they have a hard time even saying social justice. I mean, got to the old deal say.
But that's what they're doing.
Oh, I know what. I'm aware. I've been worked on this all summer. I haven't been real successful at getting what I think my ideas are listened to, and but I am not the guy that makes all the decisions on the budgets. But I'll certainly be one of those that has some significant input in it. So we'll see how it comes out once we start sitting down and working on those.
What about U of I?
Yeah, with the University of Idaho, they got themselves in trouble financially so bad that's been my focal point. Did we hire a guy that can get the financial thing done? And we have.
And he has, but he still
that's
has.
number one to me. Now, we can talk about the hair on the dog, but the dog was about to be shot. He was bad. And now we got to get him upright and get him going. And then we're going to talk about some of the others. Sometimes you can't prioritize everything number one. But the money deal, I think, was a serious problem there. And this guy's been able to, in my view, make some changes there that are real positive.
And it sounds as if, look, I'll give them a little bit of credit. They got rid of the Confucius Institute, or they're in the process of getting rid of that. And so hopefully,
right. I heard about that.
I mean, that's something that is notable.
Yeah.
But they still have the Black Lives Matters web pages, and many of the same problems that you see in Boise State at U of I. And do you think, now they were told last year, the universities were, to cut back the administrative bloat, get back to your core mission, and report to JFAC what they did to accomplish that. Were you satisfied with their report to you?
Well, we require these reports. Have you looked at any of those reports, Wayne? Do you find those pretty fulfilling?
Sometimes they're very entertaining and useful in just what they don't include. And that's kind of what I got out of this university report. It didn't say very much. It talked about things that they were doing before the legislature requested an update on what they were doing.
Yeah.
So they completely avoided any of the discussions that if you saw what was happening on the House floor last session, there was real concern that, and this was before, Big City Coffee happened at Boise State, and before the Black Lives Matters web pages went up, there was real concern about the universities that were sort of heading off into this very leftist direction. And has that been ameliorated? Did they report that they've changed that in the reports?
I don't think that, I didn't read it in there, at least. But you know what? One of the things, from a big picture standpoint, this is an issue. A big picture, we haven't even agreed on what our objective is in higher ed in Idaho, Wayne. Until we do that, we're talking about stuff here that's important, but we haven't agreed on what the objective is. And I sat on a deal that was put together last year to try to talk about funding for higher ed and developing some sort of a funding model that we could agree on. And it hasn't been finished, but I was the Senate guy that was on there, and it's just got to get, because there's COVID, everybody uses that as an excuse, but we have got to figure out what success looks like when we see it in the university system.
What do you think it looks like?
I'll tell you what I think it looks like. A 5-year salary after graduation. It's about making money. If we're training people that can't make a living, and I don't want to pick on a degree in art because my mother had a master's degree in art. I think that's valuable, but she also then taught school to make money, So, but we can measure 5-year salary averages. Well, is that a meter that, I'm a business guy, I like to know what the money looks like. Right now, we've talked about, graduation rate. Well, graduation in some of these things are kind of a waste of taxpayer money because the person that graduates that way can't be productive.
Sure,
so I like the idea of making money.
You get 6 years to earn your degree at the University of Idaho, and about half of the students will manage to get a degree in that amount of time.
Okay.
And of those, some amount of them will major in, gender studies or some silly thing like that.
Okay.
And they won't be able to find a job, and we count that as success.
So you see what I'm saying?
You see that.
That's not success.
Yeah.
I want to talk about what did they do to contribute to society in terms of cash.
So how many more years are we going to allow this to go on? Before?
Well, I've got to sell my point. I need help from guys like you helping me sell that point because it's a struggle. They want to talk about some academic idea, and that's probably great, like graduation rate. Well, that's not a success story. We got to get this money rolling. We got to get people gainfully employed, and yeah, that's probably old school thinking, but it still works in today's society, in my view.
You've been in the legislature for how many terms
4 years.
now? So 4 years.
4 years.
4 years.
Right.
Is it 4 years?
Yeah, it seems like I've been.
It seems like you've been here long. You're like a bad penny. We can't get rid of you. But in your amount of time being on here
Right.
and kind of watching this from all along, do you feel as if the universities have? I mean, I was going to say, do they have too much power? But I guess what I really want to ask is, does the legislature exert the necessary oversight over these schools? Because it seems as if they're just doing whatever. I mean, even you'll adjourn this session and left to their own devices, they'll go ahead and raise tuition, and they won't even bat an eye at it, nor will they ask you your opinion of it if you left to their own devices. Is the legislature exerting the oversight over these schools that they should?
Well, here's how I look at that, Wayne, and I look at it as a business. I go to the banker. We're the bankers, as I see it, for those universities. So we give them some money. Then we say, okay, here's what we expect you to achieve based on this money that we're lending you. And then we want to report, did you succeed at those objectives? Well, here's what's wrong. We haven't agreed on the objectives.
So the answer is no. You're not exercising any oversight.
Well, I think we
because you haven't agreed on the objectives,
and so we argue about the tactics, which are social justice, what's the right class for human relations or something. That's not the problem. The problem is you got to agree on the objective. It's like in your business. It probably has something to do with the bottom right-hand corner. Well,
with what?
The bottom right-hand corner
of what?
Your spreadsheet. That's profit.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're a nonprofit, so I'm
okay. Yeah, but you understand.
The cash flow is more the issue.
Yeah,
but I get you. Okay.
Well, why don't we agree on what that's supposed to look like? We don't agree, and we just keep on funding and criticizing and funding and criticizing. Let's get an objective on the wall. Even if we don't get there, let's agree that we want to improve salaries at 5 years post-graduation. And then let's find the ways to get there, not derailing ourselves on other things that may or may not matter. If you can make the money, get it. However, with your degree.
Well, if that's the objective.
Well, I'm offering it as a suggestion. We have no agreed upon objective, Wayne.
So if you don't have an agreed upon objective, why give the universities the ability to, on their own, raise tuition and fees without the legislatures? You're just giving them permission to grab more money out of the pockets of taxpayers and students.
With that line of thinking, we could agree that we shouldn't give them anything until we agree to an objective, and I'd be on the same team.
Well, but if you can't come up with an objective and they're just getting money out of whatever pockets they can, that's what they're going to do. Their incentive is just to get more money, not really worry about the results.
I say we need to agree on what the results are, and that's what I'm trying to relay is let's get her done. Let's get something agreed upon as to what an objective is.
In your mind, is there any objective in the world for the higher education system that necessitates Boise State University and Idaho State University being the homes of National Public Radio in Idaho?
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, come on. You must have an opinion. Have you listened to NPR lately?
No. In fact, I don't get it, and so I don't know.
But taxpayers have to pay for it.
Right.
You should really listen to it. You'd be interested to know that it's not exactly what you would call down the middle, unbiased.
I trust you on that.
Reporting, and you write a budget that includes funding for those programs. Just saying, I guess. Let me go back to K-12 one more time, but because one of the issues that we've been looking at, there was a bill introduced in the House Education Committee a couple weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, that says that if you're a school board, you should have the ability to decide if you would like to negotiate or not negotiate with the teachers union. Presently, state law says you're a school board, you shall negotiate.
Yeah.
The bill that's in the House says you may negotiate, you might not.
Right.
What do you think?
Haven't seen the bill.
Haven't seen it. You have not heard this issue before.
What I try to do is wait until bills get to the Senate Because if I try to keep track of every bill in the House, I can't keep up with the bills in the Senate.
That's fine.
But I'm not a union guy. If you want to get down to
That's
philosophically, I'm not a union supporter guy that I think that all unions are wonderful. If that's what, but I have not seen the bill. So
but I think there is some concern, and maybe you have. I don't know if you do or not have a concern that some of these unions have so much power, and that's the reason why they were able to, over in West Ada School District, launch a sick out that resulted in the inconveniencing and burdening of parents and students alike in that school district. But the school board still has to, under state law, negotiate with the union.
Yeah.
Are you? You're not.
I'm not in West Ada. I don't know what's going on in there. But I don't.
Are you open to the idea of?
I'm open to anything, and I'll visit with anybody and listen to anybody. And that's I've always said that. That's my job, to listen to people.
Do you think that the unions are a helpful force in the state education system, or a detriment?
It's a mixed bag. I don't know of anything that I've found yet that's all good. Or all bad, probably. But I'm not. I don't know if I know enough about what the union deals. We've had some problems locally with the union things, but we've also had some school board problems. It's all
This is what happens.
Not the biggest fish to fry in my world.
It's not. What is?
Well, I think we started with that, and that was the K3 reading levels. I think that, to me, if I were to pick one thing,
that would be the one. In
Idaho, that's the one that I think is the most concerning to me, and that we have not got a solution for yet.
You have not seen anything that you fancy for this legislative session that would get at that issue?
Well, I've seen a lot of things, but everybody wants to peddle their papers. I've probably seen at least a half a dozen solutions to them, but I'm not willing to
What is your perfect solution for that? If you had all the power and everybody just said whatever Carl comes up with is what the Senate and the House are going to pass, and the governor is already committed to sign it. We don't even have to know what's in there. Carl, just tell us what it is you want to do, and we're going to do it.
Well, here's how Carl thinks. He doesn't claim to be an expert on education. He's kind of a money guy, and I take recommendations of people who know the business, and I listen to a bunch of different ideas, which is what I'm doing now. And then I try to make the most reasonable idea as a solution from those suggestions. But I don't come in and say, here's Carl, he's king for a day type stuff. I think that's a poor approach for a legislator, frankly.
But you must have some idea of what would be acceptable to you or not acceptable.
Well, nothing that I haven't told you already, which is I think we need to solve this reading problem, and some of that may have to do with getting these kids better prepared at an earlier age with the family. And, I don't know about you, Wayne, but when I first had kids, they didn't say, Carl, you're qualified to be a teacher to these kids before you have them. They just you have the kid, and now I don't think I had the tools to know. Well, maybe we need to give some of these parents the tools to know. Maybe that's a partial solution. But I don't have anything new to add to what we already said earlier. But that's
doesn't that
point.
Presume, though, that the government has to play a role in this equation?
No, it's an optional thing. It wouldn't be a required thing at all. I don't see them forced to do it. But if parents need help and they don't know where to get it, and many of my parents that I represent don't have the money to do it, why shouldn't we help with a public education for them?
Well, because by doing that, don't you make parents less likely to develop the skills to be able to handle that on their own?
But Wayne, I probably like to be a rocket scientist, but I really can't develop those skills without a little assistance. And maybe I'll have to get some education to do that. And maybe the government will have to help me become a rocket scientist, because no matter how hard I want to be, I think I'd struggle. So I think some parents who want to be really good parents don't know where to start. Did you know that when your kid was born, that the most important thing that he could do is learn to read by the 3rd grade? I didn't. We read to the kids, and we did the best we could. We stumbled around, and turns out, the kids...
And you still did okay.
They succeeded in spite of their parents.
And it still happens. I mean, that's still a thing that occurs. Kids still learn
in the success stories.
In spite of their parents, in spite of the school system.
But only half of them.
Only half?
Yeah, half of them. By the 3rd grade, only half of them can meet any standard for reading.
But that's in the education system that you've already established as a school system, as a publicly funded school system, right?
What I'm saying is that's not good enough. What I'm saying is that you asked me what I would do to change it, and I'm trying to tell you what I would do to change it, and now you're saying that it's publicly. I'm not sure I'm
No,
tracking.
I was,
Help me
but
understand.
it seems. So you're saying we have a problem with the existing education system because
Based on the evidence that
kids
is presented
are
to us.
supposed to be literate and able to read at grade level by third grade. We've
Does that seem reasonable?
been saying that for years.
Yeah, but doesn't that seem reasonable, Wayne?
Yeah, sure. But the school system has failed to do that,
Right.
and so now you're entertaining the possibility of more government intervention in the education system as a solution. But you're not sitting and saying, well, maybe the government involvement isn't helping matters. Maybe if we had less of the government involvement, we'd have better outcomes.
Well, I'm great. Let's show us how that works.
so
Let's show me the data.
You would entertain that possibility too.
Sure. I'll expect the same of that idea as I will of these ideas. Let's have the data that demonstrates that's the way to go. Let's do it.
What if the data just says parents are better off not having a government-run education?
Well, that's an anecdotal story. That's not a fact.
Just throwing that out there, possibly.
I don't blame you.
Any other issues that we haven't touched on that you want our viewers to know about?
No, I think, it's a frustrating experience. You want to try to help people, and then you get all these ideas, and then as a legislator, you try to amalgamate those into some solution, and then it's hard, but you got to keep trying. That's why you're here to help people, and I intend to continue to do that.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the program, and good luck.
Well,
you have
that's fine.
you have your hands full.
I appreciate your time, Wayne.
And thanks for tuning in. If there's a guest you'd like me to interview, drop me a note, Wayne@idahofreedom.org. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Hoff Time Report with Wayne Hoffman. Be sure to visit idahofreedom.org for Wayne's articles, IFF research, and show notes from today's episode.